G'day. Being at a Nuffield conference, I can assume that amongst the cohort we have here this afternoon, we have quite a large contingent of Australian landholders who would conjunctively own and manage quite a lot of native vegetation across our vast country. And if you're like me, you may be contemplating what the future holds for landholders who currently manage and steward areas of native vegetation. Initially, I started my Nuffield journey wanting to investigate a more sustainable approach to land development, which I probably should have mentioned. I changed my topic, but wanting to look at a more sustainable approach to land development than what we have traditionally seen in the past. However, through my travels and discussions with farmers worldwide, I chose to focus more on the economic implications of managing native vegetation within a predominantly cropping enterprise. The core of my inquiry was to assess whether native vegetation on cropping farms presents a financial burden to landholders and to explore potential income streams beyond conventional grazing. The focus was motivated by the current legislative challenges in New South Wales, which have been put in place to combat land use change. If we as farmers can no longer develop our land, then how can we best utilise that land going forward to minimise the opportunity cost lost? My travels took me across New Zealand, South and North America and Europe, and I observed a common occurrence among the arable farms that I visited. That being that nearly all of them had fully developed their land to the point where they were 93, 95 and 98% of their total holding was developed, with the remainder of the land being deemed unproductive. When I inquired about the proportion of land dedicated to native vegetation and whether farmers would prefer to see this increase, the consensus was nearly always yes. However, they stated a tangible economic benefit would be necessary to incentivise this shift. With a quote from a farmer in Texas sticking with me, "It's hard to be green if you are in the red." So the central question that persisted was, how can we generate revenue or enhance the farming system from native vegetation areas? And to be honest, this proved to be a complex challenge. I explored a few various avenues, but was often met with roadblocks across the way. When talking carbon agreements, issues such as the complexity and bureaucracy involved, and the uncertainty of the long-term commitments and the cost of the land use restrictions were often raised by farmers. I visited a Nuffield Scholar in the Netherlands, where government initiatives had made it compulsory in order to keep their subsidies to plant a 4-metre boundary around the outside of their fields to promote biodiversity and integrated pest management. However, the farmers there were very frustrated as they felt that these areas had attracted more bad pests than good quite often, and they were forced to accept the land value loss on this land. Which brings me on to the issue of disparity in land values between native vegetation and cropping land, which poses another substantial obstacle for farmers. Typically, land is valued primarily based on its economic returns rather than its environmental benefits. This economic-centric valuation often means that native vegetation, which may offer important ecological advantages but lower immediate financial returns, is valued much less compared to arable land. Consequently, the lower market value of land dedicated to native vegetation was often a huge deterrent for farmers from maintaining or expanding these areas. To be honest, when I got home, I felt a little deflated. I felt a little deflated because I didn't get that light bulb moment through my travels where I got my answer. I was trying to convey a message through the eyes of the farmer. However, I was quick to learn that there is quite a spread between the social and environmental pressures and the on-ground realities which farmers were experiencing day to day. I feel that for substantial, broader progress to be made, there needs to be a concerted effort from both government and industry to support and incentivise farmers who are acting as land stewards and contributing to the greater cause. In doing this, we can create an environment where farmers are motivated to look upon these areas more favourably and ultimately benefiting both the environment and the agricultural industry as a whole. And lastly, before I hand back over to the questions, I'd just like to throw a quick shout out to Nuffield Australia, Cotton Australia and CRDC and everyone that was involved in my journey. I'm sure I don't have to tell the people in the room just how much we all appreciate the opportunity that we've got. Thank you.
You want to stay there? Okay, while we've got you there, let's ask you a couple of questions. On your travels, did you find any areas of native vegetation which were actually performing better financially for farmers?
Yes, I did find a few areas. I found a few government programs which were in the US and Europe, which were providing quite significant returns to farmers. However, most of the time they were more involved with farmers pulling land out of their cropping systems and regenerating them into native vegetation. But one instance that I found which really stuck with me was when I was in Texas. I was on a cropping farm, and while I was driving around with the farmer, we drove into quite a large rocky canyon in the middle of his cropping farm. And that farmer actually stated that the land values of that rocky canyon were higher, which were coming off the back of the hunting culture which was in the US. They have such a massive hunting culture there, and those areas are quite sought after. This followed when I went into Kansas. There were signs all through the paddocks everywhere which were called walk-in hunting access. And when I asked about that as well, it was a program by the Department of Parks and Wildlife, and which allows public free access to hunt on private landholders' land, and the private landholders were paid quite generously for that effect. And I really liked this because it had a downstream effect where the Department of Wildlife and Parks, they were getting money through hunting licences and fees, and then that money was then going into wildlife conservation and habitat restoration. So I thought that was very good.
Interesting. And then, in your opinion, what are the barriers holding cropping farmers back from investigating further benefits that the native vegetation may play on their own farms?
Yeah. So I really honestly believe that we need to get to a point where farmers are looking at the areas of native veg and seeing them as an asset and not so much as a liability. I do believe there is a lot of work being done in this space, and we all heard this morning about the natural capital accounting, and which I think is going to be a very interesting space moving forward, and one that I will follow closely. However, the answer to your question is I feel that the economic benefits just need to be more aligned with the environmental benefits in order for wider adoption.
Good point. Thank you. So if we could give Tim a round of applause, that would be great. Thank you very much.